Right, Nigel Farage has resigned as the leader of UKIP, saying that he accomplished what he had set out to do. Speaking at a press conference in Westminster, he said this.
My aim in being in politics was to get Britain out of the European Union. That is what we voted for in that referendum 2 weeks ago. And that is why I now feel that I've done my bit.
So, like Denzel Washington in the movie Man on Fire, he's dropped a grenade into British society and is now walking away from the explosion in slow-mo, a thin smile upon his lips. But what's his next move? I don't know about you, but something tells me this will not be the last we hear of Mr. Fromage, as I like to call him. Remember when he quit after the election last year, then changed his mind at last minute? Will his ego be able to handle being out of the spotlight? And what next for UKIP? Well, joining us now is UKIP MEP for the North East, Jonathan Arnott. Hello, Jonathan.
Good afternoon.
Did this come as a surprise to you?
I'd say it came as a shock, but not as a surprise.
Okay, why is that?
Well, I suppose for somebody who has led the party for so long, I think to someone who's been so instrumental in everything, in terms of even getting us this referendum in the first place, let alone winning the referendum, someone who is one of the great orators of our time, then, of course, any time when somebody with that level of kudos, as it were, if he steps down, then of course it's going to come as a shock to all of us. But at the same time, you know, he's been working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, quite often, on a cause that he truly believes in, and he has delivered on that referendum result. So quite clearly, he's going to feel that he's done the thing that he was incredibly well suited to, and he's achieved that. And perhaps now he feels that now's the best time for somebody else to take over that baton and take the party forward. And I certainly would not be the one to second guess him.
Yeah, I mean, what was your take on last year? Because a lot of people are pointing to that and saying, well, he stepped down after the general election, then he was back again. He couldn't stand being out of the limelight. I mean, is there a chance that could happen again?
There's no way that's going to happen again. I think what had happened last year, to be brutally honest, is that he had he'd said that he was going to step down, and having said it, he then felt that he had to follow through on it. The NEC then said, well, we don't really want you to step down, and perhaps at that time the best way of doing it might have been to call a fresh leadership election at that point and allow everybody to let off some steam. But, you know, that's something that he could have then very well restood himself. But, I mean, this is all ancient history, you know, and certainly a very different situation to the one that we've got today.
Let's have a little bit of a reflection on Nigel Farage's career, because, you know, when you say he succeeded, of course he did, and there's not many political figures in this country who can be so quantifiably and, you know, empirically assessed, because he set out with one mission and he's achieved that mission now. I mean, tell us a little bit about, I don't know a huge amount about the history of UKIP, but I do know that several years ago when he first started banging the drum for leaving Europe and all the rest of it, that he was widely regarded as a bit of a joke figure. And your party now is extremely well established and have achieved your principal goal. I mean, is that largely down to the personality of Nigel Farage?
I think that certainly has a part to play. He's somebody who is, you know, he's somebody who expects an awful lot of everybody around him. He's somebody who has high standards himself and has high standards of other people. So certainly that drive and determination that he has, the unwillingness to accept that even when the odds were against us, he was never going to say that it wasn't going to happen, even at those points. So I think he was one who had that vision, who had that drive, who had that determination. And, you know, I've been involved with this for 15 years myself now. And over that time, I think, you know, there have been ups and downs, but ultimately, if you stick to your guns, it shows that you can achieve anything.
Yeah, I mean, people will see the, you know, public-facing image that Nigel projects of him laughing his head off with a fag in his hand and a pint in the other hand, full of fantastically populist sound bites. But as a leader of a party, is it only half the story what we see? I mean, in terms of how he has organised and professionalised your party, is that quite a different sort of character to the one that we see on the news?
And that's a very difficult question because that is something which is always a team approach. It's not a single individual that achieves all of the internal side of things. But of course, what Nigel has done in terms of internals is he's been very clearly the leader of a team, and he's somebody who expects a lot from those around him. And I think that is the one thing that does sum everything up. And and I think what you need in a leader is somebody who will lead and who will lead from the front. So if you have a leader who isn't prepared to go out and knock on doors or talk to members of the public, or who isn't prepared to work longer hours than you're working, then it's quite difficult to be a follower. But you see, Nigel is somebody who has always been prepared to roll up his sleeves and get on with it himself. And I think if you're prepared to do that, then you inspire an awful lot in those around you. And I think that is probably where Nigel has made the biggest contribution, I'd say.
Who do you want to be the next leader?
It's too early to say.
It's not. Come on, give us a name.
What I'm looking for is somebody who really understands the appeal of the party in the north of England, someone who understands the need to connect with working class communities that feel completely let down by a Labour Party that is riven with internal strife, and which just does not connect with the people who have traditionally voted for the Labour Party.
So that's your next move, really, isn't it? You've achieved us leaving Europe. Your next move is to be the opposition, effectively, isn't it? And sort of wipe out Labour. Exactly.
We've got to hold this government to account. We've got to make sure that no really means no. We've got to make sure that Brexit really means Brexit, and that we get a good deal for the UK. But at the same time, actually, we've got to look strategically at a Labour Party that just simply doesn't represent northern working class people anymore. And we've got to look at the huge opportunities in northern seats in places like Hartlepool, where we have a massive, massive chance to gain seats and to do very well at the next general election. So we certainly need a leader who's going to do those things.
Yeah, I mean, the problem will be is there's a lot of overlap between, or at least a lot of people perceive there's a lot of overlap between yourselves and the Conservative Party in terms of outlook. And the question will be if, of course, it should be your objective to replace Labour in those places that used to be their heartlands. Of course it would be. But, is the British public going to be left with enough of a political choice if the two main parties are a sort of very anti-European Conservative Party and UKIP?
I think I don't think we're saying that the Labour Party is somehow going to disappear overnight.
I don't know. They're looking that way.
Well, I would be absolutely astonished if a party that has been around for well over a century were to disappear in that way. I just don't see that happening.
All right, last question. Do you think Nigel Farage might pop up again, but in, let's say, perhaps some role in Angela Ledsam's cabinet?
Look, I am sure that at some point in the future that he will pop up again in some way, because he's somebody who truly cares.
Do you think he'd do a deal with the new Conservative leader like now?
I honestly don't think that would be the case. No, I mean he is somebody who is hugely loyal to his party, and the last thing that he would be doing would be to leave us in the lurch, and it certainly would not be in keeping with his character.
Okay, listen, thank you ever so much for joining us, Jonathan Arnott.